Hello and welcome to the Story Behind the Stories, your weekly look at the pages of the Neepawa Banner Press. Thank you very much for taking a little bit of your time and spending it right here with us on NACTV. I'm Eoin Devereux, news reporter with the Banner Press, welcoming you as always to the show, joined this week by Casper Wehrhahn, reporter again as well with the Banner Press. Good to have you here, Casper.
Good to be here once again, and very thankful that we have a lot more to talk about this week. It sure was interesting putting together the paper.
Most definitely, you are correct on that. If you are a consistent and loyal viewer of the Story Behind the Story, then you know last week we really sort of phoned it in, because last week we didn't have anything for the most part that came through for us story-wise. So it was I'm not going to lie to you, it was a pretty light edition of the Banner Press. We cannot say the same thing about this week's edition. Some of the story leads we were chasing came through for us, and a lot of news came through the channel, as it were, that we were able to chase down and put into 20 really jam-packed pages of this week's publication. And we're very proud of this, and we're not going to have any issue whatsoever filling 30 minutes of the story behind the story this week. And let's start, as we always do, with the front page. Now, before we get into this amazing picture by Jody Baker, let's talk about the big ticket item when it comes to provincial news. A provincial election has been called. We all knew it was coming. It was a requirement. It's a mandate that it has to be called by a certain date, and Heather Stephenson has done so. So, as of Tuesday, September 5th, we are in election mode. And the election is going to be a very interesting one. I think this time out, there's a little bit of frustration with the Conservative Party, but is it enough for the NDP to step in there? That's going to be, and again, let's be honest, in Manitoba, it's a two-party race for the most part. What do you think, Casper?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Conservatives typically are pretty ahead up there when it comes to voting in Manitoba. And then you see, I believe NDP like not too far behind, and Liberal doesn't really seem to have a foot in the door quite as much, so to speak. And you really don't see Greens around here very much getting any progress that way. So yeah, very much just Conservative and NDP with a little bit of Liberal trying to eke in there. And we have seen over the years a couple changes with NDP getting a little bit more here and there. And we have a little bit of that laid out on the page there too to give you sort of exact numbers there. So definitely take a look at that. It will be interesting to see how it plays out this year.
What's interesting is, and again, you being from the younger generation, you know, I'm old enough that I've seen a few of these cycles. It's interesting to watch the cycles turn, the wheels of the political spokes go round and round in Manitoba, because you get that period of time where it's the progressive Conservatives that are in there. You get majorities, you get this, you get that, and then they get a little tired and the NDP comes in. The Gary Doer years, for example, that was an extended period there where the NDP just could not be beaten in any way, shape, or form. And that was preceded before that, it was Gary Filmon, who was the leader of the Progressive Conservatives. And it just goes back and forth. It's almost like it's a tennis match between the orange and the blue right now. Liberal Party provincially in Manitoba has never been the strongest. I just started paying attention to politics in around the early to mid 80s, and that's when they were at their strongest. If I remember correctly, I think it was Sharon Carstairs who was the leader of the Liberal Party and actually was able to get the Liberals into a provincial minority in the province. But that was only for a couple years. It was that little blip in there. I forget who was running the show at the time, whether it was the NDP or the PCs, but one of those parties really messed things up. So they just dropped like a stone in a lake for a little while, but then they were able to turn it back around. And again, even though politics is a little frustrating at times, these are the little nuances of it that always keep me interested.
Yeah, for sure. And sort of a different aspect as well, it's kind of interesting seeing how things go from the inner workings of a newspaper perspective as well. And this is something we've commented on in the past, but some parties will be very good at getting an advertisement to us or a news release to us, and then others we don't hear from at all.
Yeah. It's like trying to track down a ghost sometimes. And again, that's the realities of the business of media, and not even just a newspaper. I used to have to deal with it in radio as well. But that's just the fun of the whole job as a whole. And you can see an example of that if you go inside onto page 9 of this week's edition of the Banner Press. You can see the entire page is made up. It is, in essence, an infograph of the upcoming Manitoba election for the ridings of Agassiz and Riding Mountain, in which the Neepawa Banner Press primarily covers those areas. We do cover a small bit of Turtle Mountain and Spruce Woods, but not enough really, just a small section of it. So we wanted to focus this time primarily on Agassiz and Riding Mountain. And when you pick up the page and you see it, you're going to see that there's 4 candidates that we have bios on and a little bit of details on. For Agassiz, it is Jody Byram for the Progressive Conservatives and Danica Wiggins for the Manitoba NDP. And for the Riding Mountain, it's Wayne Chacon. If I mispronounce that, Wayne, if you're watching somewhere, my apologies. I'm sure I'm going to get to know it before the election is done. And of course, Greg Nesbitt for the PC party. Now, you might be wondering, how come it's only the NDP and the PCs you covered this week? Well, there's a very good answer for that. We couldn't track down any information whatsoever on any of the other candidates that might be running for the Liberals, for the Greens, or for the new Keystone Party of Manitoba before our deadline. We had heard of one woman, her name was Ellen, I don't remember the second name, that might be running for the Liberal Party, but that was just a prospective candidate. We weren't able to track down any information on the Manitoba Liberal website on this person, so we felt in the interest of fairness, just to be safe, we only run with the information we know. And these are the candidates at this moment that we know about. Though in the interest of fairness, and we do put this on the page, in the interest of fairness that you have all the information you need come election day, should a candidate for the Manitoba Liberal Party, the Green Party of Manitoba, or the Keystone Party of Manitoba step forward in either Agassiz or Riding Mountain, we will have their bio and their information in the next edition of the newspaper. We want to make sure you know who's who and what's what going into this election, because this is going to be a very important one, I think. There is some dissatisfaction in Manitoba over a couple different things, and there's already a few political parties that are making a whole lot of promises about what they are going to do and what they're going to be spending our money on. Let's never forget that. All these promises about big spending, they plan on spending our dough with it. So we got to keep them in check, no matter whether they're wearing a blue tie or whether they're wearing a orange top or whether they're wearing a red or a green or a, I guess we can go with purple for Keystone, purple and wheat.
Yeah.
Whatever their affiliations may be, we got to keep them in check and we got to keep them honest. So, Casper, let me get your take on what you've seen so far in the ridings. I mean, as I said, I mean, it seems like it's to use the old phrase, it's a 2-horse race in both of them right now. So.
Yeah. Actually, to be honest, I haven't seen quite as much this year as I have in past years in terms of election stuff. I've sort of been out of tune with everything unless I've heard something in the office. So
honestly, that's a nice feeling, though, isn't it?
It's
a nice little
sure
break in the day.
Yeah, it gives you a nice little break from everything. So, but no, I'll have to take a look and make sure that I have all of the information that I want to know, need to know for the coming election so that I can vote accordingly. That's exactly why we have this information in the paper for all of you.
That's right. And it is very important as well that sometimes in rural areas we get to thinking that the vote doesn't matter. So-and-so is going to get in anyway. It doesn't matter. That's not the way to look at it. Every vote matters. Even if the person you support doesn't get in there, it shows an ongoing sort of development. I mean, maybe the party you're voting for only got 20% of the vote last time. But this time they got 30. That's momentum. That's moving in the right direction. And that's something that you have to sort of take in mind as well. I know for the most part, we were discussing this before we went live, it's probably going to come down to about 9 ridings in Manitoba of the, I forget whether it's 56 or 57 ridings, but I think it's only going to come down to about 9 ridings are going to decide this election, and probably 8 of them most likely are in Winnipeg. But still, it's very important to be engaged and to be knowledgeable about this. So hopefully you will take a little bit of time, read up on the election on page 1, and follow through on page 9 of this week's edition. I hope you do, because I actually designed that page, and I was just thinking about this as well, Casper. We all have these little things that we enjoy here. Special sections. Going to put a shout out for our upcoming Remembrance Day special section. Casper's been working on it, has a real eye for it in terms of the design and the content, so keep an eye out for that. Diane Warner does a lot of the advertisements, does all of the advertisements and whatnot for the Neepawa Banner Press, and has a certain sort of distinct style she likes to work with. These little infograph things, like pages like this or other election stuff, that's the stuff I like to do. There's the little creative flares here and there. It's maybe not as showy as an entire section, but it's just those little nuances I like to do, So these types of things come election time sort of get my creative juices flowing.
Yeah, and I admit it is a very strong suit for you. You always have a really nice sort of good eye for this. It always comes across really clean and just generally nice looking. It's very well set up and put together, and just like the little details are on point.
Because again, even the subtle little things, if you look at each candidate's little headshots and whatnot, you'll see the color of their political party is sort of attached around there in the bordering and all that. I mean, just those little nuanced little things that are pretty easy to do and sort of break things up, because a lot of the time it's just picture and words on a page. So we do like to get creative from time to time. So hopefully you'll take a minute or two and check out the creativity and the information that's behind it. Speaking of creativity, we were talking about this, and there is a little bit of a slight fun story to go along with it. The front page does have election news on it, but it's primarily a picture from Jody Baker of Neepawa. Jody Baker Photography does so much tremendous work, and we reached out to Jody to ask to send something of note to us, and she sent this beautiful, I believe it was a dusk picture of an old barn nearby. I think it was Minto Odana, was it?
Yeah.
And it was just so captivating, this picture. And again, it was funny. And I made the suggestion to Casper, and Casper followed through, and Jody got a laugh out of it there, is because as important as the election is, and the election is front page worthy, it's not very exciting to look at visually right now. It's not sexy. It's not.
It's not hot.
That's right. You got to get that eye catching. It's all about catching the eye and catching it there. So we asked Jody, and we said, Jody, the election's coming up. It's important, but it's not visually interesting right now. You got anything visually interesting for us? And she found that amusing. It was like, okay, I get what you're saying. And so here's a few options for you. So we do appreciate that. She has such a creative flair for the camera like that. Like me, as I've always said, as long as my thumb's not in the way, I'm happy with it. But certain people just have such a creative vision and are able to capture the moment like no other.
Yeah, it's really tough as well to capture the photo that you're envisioning in your head. But Jody really does have that good eye and technique to really be able to pull that off, and just so consistently. She does amazing work. Definitely check out her photos on her social media, or if you happen to want to purchase one, they are for sale.
That's right. I believe Home Hardware in Neepawa does have the actual copies of them. I've seen them many a time, and it's really it's unbelievable. Speaking of visual flair, this is a story, Casper, you were able to chase down, get some information on. We've got a new business that is going to be coming into Neepawa, and the entryway into that new business has got a whole heap and heck of history in there. Try saying that 5 times quick. Talk to us.
Sure does, yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so as someone mentioned, this is for a new business and a existing business, actually. This will be for the Mullen Sky General Store as well as Venus Hair and Body Care. They are working on preparing the old Team Electronics building, which does have some other businesses in it as well, so that it's ready for them to move in and start up there. And they've been making some great, steady progress. But getting into the details here, typically you don't think a doorway as being a focal point or a very attention-grabbing piece of any environment, really. This is a bit different. So they recently installed their doors, and they actually come from a very historic location for Manitoba and to a degree Canada as well. They actually come from the Royal Alexandra Hotel that was in Winnipeg, and it was something associated with the Canadian Pacific Railway. It was opened in like 1906, and eventually it, of course, got shut down, and in 1971 it was demolished. But some pieces of that still persevered in one way or another. They were kept for, museum displays, etc. And these doors were just one such thing. Massive French doors with, curved top and all that. And they're just stunning to look at, Owen. Like, not even just the sheer size of them, but the glasswork as well. And that is actually something that's really unique about them. It's got all the curves in it and beveled on top of them. It's just something you don't really see.
That's something, you don't really see it much anymore. I think it was in around the 70s, maybe into the early 80s, the minimalist concept of home design and business design really started to take off. And even though it's a simpler sort of concept, you lose something. When you look at all these businesses, when you look at all these buildings from the late 1800s into the 20th century, into the early 1900s, I mean, there was craftsmanship and there was time and effort and dedication put in there. I think it was because there wasn't television. What else were you going to look at? You couldn't, radio wasn't even a thing back then, so you could just stare at the door for about an hour and be entertained as hell. So
yeah, I mean, hey, there's something visually interesting there. Like,
yep.
You had your wallpapers, you had your fancy doors, you had all your little knickknacks.
Exactly. And that's something that's a little bit missing nowadays, and that's a shame. So it's wonderful that this business has decided to bring that closer to home. So hopefully when you do partake of the business, Venus and the, what was the name of the other store?
Mullen Sky.
Rolling Sky, okay.
Yeah.
When you get a chance to go into those businesses, hopefully you take a minute to walk through and take notice of the beauty that you just walked through. All right, let's go over into from historic doors to a brand new arena. Not exactly the easiest and seamless segue, but we're going to go with it.
It's a history of its own.
Yes. Minnedosa has their grand opening for the Minnedosa Regional Entertainment Center, the MREC. It's going to be happening this Saturday, September 9th. Originally, the media was going to be having an exclusive sneak peek on the Friday, but they had to move it over to the Saturday early, a couple hours before the grand opening and the ribbon cutting. So still very much looking forward to seeing it. I'll be there in attendance, as will NACTV. They're going to be there filming. So keep an eye on the schedule and for their little advert in the Neepawa Banner Press. They'll be spotlighting this in the near future, I am sure. They're also going to be doing something recently on Park Lake, so keep an eye out for that on the TV schedule as well. Some very intriguing things are going to be on the program. But in terms of the Minnedosa Arena, this is something we've all been waiting for. Watch the process. I've been covering it almost from the announcement, pretty much right from the announcement, pretty much right before the announcement, where they were just still dreaming of being able to do something like this. And for them to finally have the opportunity to open this up. It's about an $8.6 million facility, and that sounds like a lot of money. I know I wouldn't mind $8.6 million. It would help me get through the weekend. But for an arena nowadays, that's very inexpensive. Like Casper, like For example, the arena in Minnesota, or in Rapid City, which was very similar, I think was about 12 or 13 million. The arena in Portage La Prairie was about 45 million. And with inflation the way it's been the last couple of years, it's just amazing that they were able to reel things in and put something really nice together for such an economical price.
Yeah, exactly. Like, as you said, with all the different factors of, inflation, then just general expense too, you'd figure that definitely it would be up in the double-digit thousands at least. But no, they're able to keep it nice and tight there, and I'm really excited to see how the interior looks. I mean, it's tough to visualize it just from the outside of the building, aside from just having the sense of, this place is pretty big. So I'm really looking forward to getting a look at those pictures.
Let's be honest. And again, I don't lie to you on this show. I always tell it like it is. When you look at the exterior, and again, it's the Minnesota Regional Event Center, not the Entertainment Center. It's the Event Center. But when you look at the exterior of it right now, it's kind of boring. It really is kind of plain Jane. But I'm sure it more than makes up for it when you walk through those doors and you see the interior of it. And we're going to get a chance. And you can get a chance as well if you're out and about in Minnesota on September 9th. At 3 o'clock, they're going to be doing the ribbon cutting, and then you're able to go in and take a tour of the building. So if you're out and you're interested, go on down to Minnesota and check it out for yourself. Make a day of it. All right, so new arena sounds like it's going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun. But what happens, because it's opening a little late in the season for all the Minnesota hockey and events, like the high school hockey team, like minor hockey, like the Tiger Hills team there. What are they able to do right now? Well, I'll tell you what. They drove a little further east down the highway to Yellowhead Center, and the Yellowhead Center is more than accommodating for them right now. Yellowhead Center is very busy at the moment. September is just stacked almost to capacity with events, including 13 from Minnesota-based organizations, as I just said. I spoke with Yvonne Sisley about that, the new manager of operations for the Yellowhead Center. She said they are ecstatic to be able to assist Minnesota-based groups in this way. They know it's a special circumstance, and they've been able to work around to make sure that everybody in Minnesota, as well as our regular sort of tenants inside Neepawa, are happy and able to coincide together so that everybody gets a chance to hit the ice. We have that story. You can find it inside the paper, and it's a quick write-up I did on that. It's on page 8 of this week's edition of the Banner Press, just facing the election stuff we talked about a little earlier. So you can just tune over a little bit to your left and learn a little bit about that. So it's great that they're able to sort of deal with that right now. I wish we could close off with more good news, but that's the reality of news sometimes. Sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's not so positive. And this next story, unfortunately, is not a positive one. Emergency services, the emergency department at the Carberry Health Center, has been shut down effective immediately. This was the announcement that came out on September 1st from Prairie Mountain Health. And the pure, simple fact of the matter is, the reason it had to happen is that Carberry, at this moment in time, has no doctors. Some of the contracts came up and were completed with some of the physicians that they had. Some family moved away, retired, whatnot. But that's the reality of it right now. Carberry does not have a doctor. And for a community the size of Carberry not to have a doctor is concerning. But I don't want to lay blame. There's no reason whatsoever to lay blame in this. If you don't know the background of the story, the municipal leaders in Carberry have been working with Prairie Mountain Health for a long time to try and make something happen on this. It hasn't moved along the way they hoped it would, but it's still something they are moving on right now. And I feel bad for them. With all the nice things that have been happening for Neepawa, in terms of the new hospital, in terms of the development of the medical clinic here, to see a community such as Carberry, which is about 1,900 people, I think, do without like that, it's very unfortunate. I had the chance to speak with the mayor, Ray Muirhead, on that, and he's concerned, and they're working on this as best they can. So I hope that this does ultimately have a positive end to it. But for the time being, when it comes to the EAR in Carberry, the doors are closed.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's very tough to hear about, even if you're not living in the community. As you said, for a community that size to not have that type of service, especially with the growth that it has been experiencing, it's devastating to not have that. You have to travel so much further for those essential services or emergency services in some cases. Neepawa, Brandon, who knows, maybe have to go to Winnipeg now, depending where you are, what's available too. And of course in Neepawa we have a big community ourselves, and we've experienced a lot of growth, so our own facilities at certain times might be fairly busy too. So
we were just having this conversation a little bit earlier in the office, talking about wait times at the Neepawa Health Center right now. And again, because there's so many new families and people coming here, as well as outlying communities such as Carberry, for example, that have to rely on Neepawa or Brandon perhaps, it puts a lot of stress on the issues get moved around, unfortunately, and hopefully the issues can be solved in Carberry. Ultimately, these are the types of stories we don't like to talk about, but we have to talk about, and we do hope that ultimately we'll be able to end this tenure, this article off with a happy ending at the end of the day. Maybe a couple weeks from now, maybe a couple months from now, where we're doing an interview with the new physicians in the town of Carberry. But we'll find that out, won't we? And again, it does segue as well a little bit, Casper, too. That's why the importance of a provincial election, which we talked about earlier. These are the types of pertinent issues that are usually a big part of it as well. So hopefully people will keep that in mind.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. I don't think I even could have tried.
Yeah. But again, having said that, I don't want to, because the Progressive Conservatives are in power right now, I don't want you to think I'm ragging on the PCs. Because I remember just as well, just as much, when we were having nursing shortages and those types of issues, hallway medicine as it were, during the NDP. Neither one of these has done great jobs, if I'm being honest with you, over the years. So hopefully one or maybe a third party will come up with the solutions we need, because we need them, and we need them now. That's pretty much it. We're only got a couple minutes left right now. We could talk to you about so much more. We could talk about the Rose Bowl Golf Championship that took place at the Neepawa Golf and Country Club. We could share with you details of the Neepawa Titans training camp that just wrapped up and shifted into the exhibition season. Or we could talk about the choir as well, a submitted story we're very appreciative of from the community choir. But that's why you need to pick up a copy of the Neepawa Banner Press to see it for yourself. You can find that anywhere in Neepawa and surrounding communities, even into Brandon, in certain locations. And if you're not able to find a physical copy of it, you can always find it. We go live every Friday morning at 9 a.m. on mywestmen.ca. So hopefully you'll take a few minutes of your time and spend it going through the pages. So that's pretty much it for this week's edition of The Story Behind the Story. Again, Casper, good to have you in here, and great that we were able to talk about stuff on the page.
Absolutely. Great to be here once again.
And thank you, as always, for sticking around with us right here on NAC TV. We do appreciate it, and we do look forward to having you tune in once again next week for the next edition of The Story Behind the Stories. Have another great weekend.